Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another Thirsty Thursday live stream. So, in today's episode, we have an awesome content creator, web app pen tester, and the whole shebang. So, you guys know the deal. If you're new to the stream, hang out, ask questions, all that good stuff, subscribe to the channel, you know the drill. So, we're going to bring in Tib3rius and we'll have him introduce himself and see what he's been up to. What's up? How you doing,
Hey,
Tib3rius?
good. Thank you. It's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No, likewise. Thank you for sparing an hour of your time and hanging out and doing all your good stuff. So, if for those folks that have been living under a rock, if so, like who is Tib3rius and what have you been up to since you've been back home from DEF CON?
Yeah, I mean, mostly recovering from COVID and StefCon, but that was all right. It went okay.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as to who I am, I've been a content creator for like 4 or 5 years now. I originally created some tools and courses for OSCP, Auto Recon being the tool, and also a couple of privilege escalation courses for OSCP students, which got pretty popular. But then, yeah, I mostly stream on Twitch. I try and stream on Twitch once or twice a week. I also have a YouTube channel I stream to and I make videos for. And yeah, that's basically what I do. I'm a full-time web app pen tester though, so that's basically my day job. The content creation's just side work, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So for, like you said, like the OSCP. So did you start creating content because you were studying for the OSCP and you're like, okay, like this will be useful? Or like what intrigued you to start creating content?
Yeah, so Auto Recon, like the tool, that was definitely something that I created during my OSCP, because it's basically a combination of a few tools I was using. None of the 3 tools did exactly what I wanted, so I was like, why don't I just kind of merge these tools into one?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what came out of that. And then after I passed my OSCP, a lot of people I basically ran a Discord server with
Mm-hmm.
a few friends for InfoSec prep. So basically preparing students for the OSCP, other exams. And a lot of people were saying how the OSCP doesn't really teach privilege escalation.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of went from that, like, if I made a couple of courses for privilege escalation and put them online, like, and charged like $20 for them, would that interest people? And a lot of people were like, yeah, that would. And so that's how that came about. It was more of like, hey, people are obviously wanting to learn privilege escalation. The OSCP isn't teaching it. And at the
Mm-hmm.
time, that was a core part of the exam. If you didn't know privilege escalation, you couldn't pass the exam because you just couldn't get enough points.
Yep.
So that was why I created those originally.
Cool. So this might be a side question for that. Why do you think like a company like OffSec would offer a certification without the training to be able to officially learn a topic that needs to be done, right? So
How spicy of a take do you want here?
as spicy as Vindaloo as you want.
I mean, that's the thing about OffSec. They, like, even last year, they let basically all of their content creators go. Like, they laid them off. So a company like OffSec, I feel like they were the top company for, certs, at least for pen testing. They've just fallen off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's kind of weird to look back when I was going through my pen testing journey, because I got my OCP really late. Like I've been a pen tester for like 7 years before I got my OCP. Like at the time, it was a cert, but you didn't necessarily need it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, like when I was going through like being a junior, like pen tester, it was like, oh yeah, OCP has a cert, Sans has a cert. The OCP is really cheap. Like it's a really cheap cert. So to see like the whole, to see it go OCP, like OffSec, go from the cheap cert company to basically they're charging through the roof now, and
Yep.
you don't really learn much from the course, but you get a cert at the end, maybe. Has kind of been fascinating, especially as you have all these other companies spinning up and releasing their own certs for like much cheaper and
Yep.
that actually teach you stuff. So yeah, I think honestly, I feel like OffSec lost their way a little bit. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
they're too big.
Yep.
They were using outdated slides for years longer than they should have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem when you're not teaching stuff that you need, and you kind of make it part of your mantra. The whole try harder.
Yep.
Making, like you should try harder. We shouldn't. We don't need to try harder and actually write the stuff that you need to learn. You need to Google harder. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that if that becomes your mantra, that's kind of a bad look for a cybersecurity educational business. Like,
I
really.
agree.
So yeah, that's my take
No,
on that.
no, it totally, and I'm 100% with you, and that's why, like, after I did, like, because I really love, actually, TCM security, hack the box, and those, like, and I love supporting those kind of companies as well, because it's especially like TCM, right? I know Heath, he's like a friend and everything like that, so it's like, okay, I can provide the support whatever I can. So I was like, okay, let me try to start taking their certs. When I was talking offline, like the PJPT, PMPT, I was like, this is actually like what he teaches in his PEH course. You're going to actually, if you pay attention, you're going to pass. And it's not that whole try harder. It's like, okay, like what you're trying to learn in this specific course, you're going to get on the exam we want to see you succeed. We don't want to see you fail, So
Yeah.
it's like, that should be someone's, drive on any of these certifications. And that's, now studying for like, CPTS or any of these, and we'll get into the web app stuff, is like, okay, like Hack the Box, it was awesome. I'm more me personally. I love to watch videos and learn. That's how I grasp things a little easier than trying to read a whole bloody, thing. And then it's like, oh, now I have to, read, and then I have to go back up and, reread because I forgot instead of like watching a video on one screen, it's like listening, taking notes,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, so, if anyone from Hack the Box is ever watching this, like you should incorporate some videos. I think that thing will make you like top notch. So yeah, like in going through like the penetration tester path, like I learned so much, and I thought I knew quite a bit. Maybe I don't convey or showcase as much as I know on the internet, but I'm like, okay, like I definitely learned so much more. It's like, oh shit, like I'm pretty. I thought I was just going to zip through it. I'm going to be honest. Like, yeah, I'm admitting it. I'm like, oh, this is going to be, I just want to take the cert. And the way to get the cert and get the voucher is you have to go through this bloody long ass thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's like, oh man, I can't just go take the cert. So now I have to zip through this, and it wasn't zipping through shit. You know what I mean? you had to do some stuff. So kudos to them. So you said you've been a pen tester for 7 years. Were you always on the web app side, or were you doing other kind of pen testing? And what led you and, tickled your fancy to get into web apps?
Yeah. So, well, I've been a pen tester for 7 years before I took the OSCP. I've technically been in the field for over 12 now. Yeah.
Nice.
But I wasn't always in web apps. So I started out as a junior doing basically everything. Like the company basically that I joined, I had no real experience because 12 years ago that you could do that. Unfortunately. But yeah, they basically just threw me onto tests with with a senior, and basically been like, yeah, just like look. This is like back when we went into offices,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so it was like, yeah, sit next to this guy. He'll show you how to do stuff. I knew some things from like my degree. Like we did some security testing courses as part of a
Mm-hmm.
degree. Um, but yeah, it was mostly just thrown in the deep end, learn as you go, teach yourself in your spare time. And so I was doing internals, externals, doing like mobile app stuff. I was always drawn to web apps mostly because I before, like, as I was growing up, I did some like web development, like stuff like that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just my own personal sites, just random, really rubbish sites.
Mm-hmm.
So I already kind of knew how web apps work from that perspective. I knew all about the infrastructure side of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that came kind of more naturally to me than like an internal did.
Yep.
And yeah, I basically just decided early on, like, that's where I want to focus my career. And I want to just try and do web apps as much as possible. And luckily, like in this industry, you can. I mean, maybe there are some companies that don't let you do that anymore. I've learned, but like the vast majority are pretty good. If you want to specialize and just do, you know, web apps, or you just want to do red team internal stuff, then most companies I feel are fine letting you do that. So that's kind of where I sort of pivoted my career and have just gone ever since.
Nice. Yeah. And I wanted to, sprinkle some sprinkles on top of that to say, like that's what, I really enjoy about a few companies. And it's like, I've been on interviews years ago, like, trying to get into pen testing. And they're like, and literally, if you query on my resume, my CV, SQLI, that shit is not found, right? Because I can do it, but I can't really get in. But like if you query like Active Directory, I can, light that shit up, So it's like,
Yeah.
and it's just like, oh, now you have to, I just hate those companies or whatever. It's like, I'm not applying for a web app tester, right? I'm applying for just, their whatever penetration tester, but I look in there and it's like 25% web app, 75% everything else. I'm like, okay, I'm probably good with 25%. And when you get on this fucking interview, it's like 75% of the questions are like all about web app. I'm like, LFI and Dora, whatever the fucking Dora the Explorer, all this other shit. I'm like, dude, like I don't even have those acronyms on my resume. You know what I mean? Like, let's focus on what I know versus like trying to make me look like a retard. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there's some of these companies out. I'm not going to mention the companies, but like there was one company I just fucking hung up on them. I was on the Teams interview. I was like, this is like an interrogation. Fuck this. Boom. I just hit, like goodbye. And the person that recommended me, I was like, yo, like they didn't ask me any questions about, what we talked about, So, and I think some of these companies, for example, if they have to just for HR, interview, 5 to 10 people and they already know who they're going to pick and they just have to do that just to check off something. Do you ever feel that way?
Yeah, I sometimes, I think less when I've interviewed recently, just because I've been going for like principal positions, and there generally aren't that many principals interviewing anyway.
Fair
like
enough.
There are far more like of the senior and junior people interviewing these days. So yeah, I definitely feel like that's probably a thing. Like they already know, or they've already extended an offer, because that happens. The interview process is so fluid. Like I guarantee if you're at a final stage interview, there's a chance that somebody has already been offered the job and they're just doing it to be courteous, because if that person turns them down, which can happen,
Fair
then
enough.
obviously they don't want to reject you. So I kind of understand why they do it. There is a logical reason. But yeah, it does suck when it happens sometimes.
Yeah, that it does. And it happened to a friend of mine. Like, yeah, it just, and that's why like now we can transition to some like other things before we get into the web app stuff, is like networking, right? Like how important do you think to get into penetration testing, whatever web app, is like networking, like going to conferences, going to, we met each other through conferences and through other friends and just the community. How important do you think that is?
I think, yeah, it's hugely important. It's not to say that you won't be able to get into the industry if you don't do any networking. But yeah, I think it is important, especially because you can just, I don't know, it's trying to collect my thoughts.
Go for it.
It's just good to meet people, and some of those people you'll become friends with, or they'll at least remember you, and you can actually get sort of job interviews that way. A lot of the time. So I know like some people have gone to cons and have met people who were looking, like, or met people who knew that their company was looking. And they might not have found that by just regular like LinkedIn or anything like that.
Exactly. And yeah, I truly agree, because like, Red Seer, right? Like I went out to, I applied to do a workshop and a talk at HackSpaceCon and it got accepted. And I just talked and I met Ken and the gang from Red Seer. And I was like, hey, like, do you mind if you guys need any part-time, contractors? I don't mind doing some stuff. And went through the interview, told them what I knew and what I didn't know. And going back to what you said, like it's lovely because it's like I'm not a web app guy, but if someone's doing a web app, they do that. Like they're like, oh, Pat, if you want to go shadow XYZ while they're doing this engagement, holler at him and see if he's okay with that. And it's been like, the person that I shadowed, it was like, I was so grateful. I was like, oh shit, like this is cool. Like I can just shut up, zip it, you share your screen, and I'll just take notes. And, and so there is the beauty of that. If you have a good company that that they're willing to do that. So that's always, always definitely a good stuff. And so, yeah, cons and networking is definitely, we'll bypass that. What is it? ATS system or whatever the TS, whatever the hell the system is for applications and resumes. So as far as like DEF CON, what was your, experience this year with DEF CON? I always watch your little videos, your tips and tricks before DEF CON, which is always cool. And so how was your experience this year at the Las Vegas Convention Center versus like Caesars Forums? And what are your thoughts about the whole new venue?
I personally thought it was great. I think there's like, obviously I think that it's interesting. Like if you ask people who've gone to DEF CON like for like 10 or more years, I think they probably hated it. I'm not sure if that's because DEF CON's just become bigger in general, or like they're just getting like it's just not nostalgic anymore. I think if you were new, you probably enjoyed it just because it felt more like a convention. Like I've this was only my 4th DEF CON. I like massively failed on like the DEF CON like stuff before COVID, but like I'm so glad I go now. But like it's like especially the last 2 years when it was at Caesars Forum, and we say it's at Caesars Forum, but like it's not.
No,
It's at
exactly.
Caesars Forum and 3 other hotels, which are kind of in the vicinity, but are still quite a long walk to get to. And like that's the issue. And that's why I loved it this year. To have everything under one roof, like it meant, I swear, like a bunch of villages got visited more than they ever did in previous years. Because honestly, if you were a village at the end of the, I don't know if you remember the flamingos.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
let's put con center in quotes,
Yep.
because it's basically a really long snake corridor with some rooms off of it, and it's really long. Like it takes a good 5 to 10 minutes to walk all the way down to the end.
Yep.
And if you're at the end and you're the village at the end, there's no way back other than to go back along that snake corridor. There's no exit at that end. So that's kind of crazy. And I feel like that village, whatever, I think it was the red team village one year.
Yeah, it was a red team. Yeah, like it was all the way upstairs, and
yeah.
And
Like,
it's like you have to
hardly
go.
anyone.
Yeah.
Hardly anyone's going to go unless they really want to go see the red team village. Then they'll go, but otherwise, there's no point. Nobody's looking at that map and going, "Oh yeah, that looks like a really good walk." So this year, having everything just under one roof, like honestly, if the main hallway to get from like the main entrance all the way down to the bar that they had set up, that was maybe a 5-minute walk.
Yeah.
Like if you're pacing it, like it's not too bad of a walk. And then the villages are off to the side. There's like an upstairs, like there's 2 floors upstairs, but they were quite small, so they were manageable as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought from a logistics perspective, it was really good.
Yeah.
I think where it failed was it wasn't even down to DEF CON's fault. It was the fact that they really only had like 6 months or so to plan this.
Yeah.
Like because Caesars canceled on them back in February.
Yep.
Like if you only have you got to find a convention center in Vegas, you've got to make sure you've got to plan. Like the amount of planning to even get DEF CON done this year must have been insane.
Yeah.
So I feel like they pulled it off really well. I think it's going to just be better next year because they'll know exactly what went wrong this year. They'll know how to work with the space. But I think it's also a place that DEF CON can grow just because, and a lot of people don't realize this, we were in the LVCC West. The LVCC West is like less than a third of the LVCC.
Yeah.
So there are other convention halls at that building, like at that place.
Yeah.
That we could potentially expand to if needed.
Yep.
Which I think is the main selling factor for DEF CON. Like, because DEF CON maxed out that property this year. In 5 years, they'll probably be at 2 of the convention halls easily. if
Yeah.
they expand enough. So yeah, I think it's a good
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it this year. It sucks that I didn't get to like see so many other things, but because me and Devin owned. We were just like walking, shooting the shit, and then we went to like the Blue Team Village, and then we ended up volunteering there out of nowhere. And then I was a volunteer at Red Team Village, which I'm super super grateful for. And all the folks over there were like super welcoming. So I'm super grateful to be a part of the Red Team Village this year. And yeah, I can I can see like if I remember last year, like when I went to the Red Team Village, because like, oh, okay, like this is a cool little village. I would like to see it. And I remember the fucking line, dude. Like,
Yeah.
even this year, even this year, I was like, they have like, man, it's crazy how long these lines get. And it's like, and if you're a volunteer, whatever, and you go out there, you telling them like, hey, good luck. You're not getting a seat. So I would just, bugger off and go do something else because you're not going to get in. And these people just stood on this line. I'm like, you're wasting like hours worth of your time and you're not going to get in. It's like, if you're not the first 100 or whatever, 75, 100 people, it's like, it's crazy. That line was bananas. But that's cool. So going into like certifications, you said you did the OSCP. So someone that wants to get more, proficient with web apps, web application, what would be, not only the certification, but what would be the journey to transition to be proficient enough to get maybe a junior or mid-level position in web app? How did you do it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm basically self-taught, so that's how I did it. But I tell everyone like who asks me like, "Oh, yeah, how did you get in? Like, how can I replicate you?" It's like that's just not possible anymore. Like, it just isn't. Like the way I did it is just not feasible. What I would say, having spoken to a bunch of people who have got into the industry recently, especially with web apps, like obviously there's a bunch of free resources out there, like Portswigger's Web Academy, which is great. But there's also, TryHackMe has a bunch of free rooms. Right, even if you subscribe to TryHackMe, you have a bunch of, you can get a bunch of the paid content. They have some web app stuff. HackTheBox have some cheap web app stuff. All right, TCM now have a web app course,
Yep.
and from there you can kind of like almost. This is like and I'm not saying people should expect to make money from it, but bug bounty is good for web apps just because you can sign up for a bug bounty platform for free, and you can pretty much just try your hand at web app testing.
Yep.
On a bunch of different targets, and yeah, you're probably not going to find stuff, especially on like the public programs. You're probably not going to find a lot of stuff, but it's going to give you real world experience actually hacking or actually experimenting with some web apps past the obvious like labs that you'll do in Portswigger's Web Academy, where the problem with labs is you go in knowing that they're vulnerable.
Fair enough.
And that's okay if you're learning, but it's terrible if you're trying to just be a pen tester, because you adopt this mindset of like, oh well, I know it's vulnerable, therefore I've got to keep going until I get something.
Exactly.
Whereas if you're doing a regular pen test, you just got to know, okay, well, I'm gonna probe this particular request for like maybe half an hour to an hour, and if I see something interesting, sure, let's go down a little rabbit hole and see if we can get anything out of it. But if I don't see anything interesting, is it worth doing anything further when I have all these other things to test? Like, because that's the thing, most pen tests are time boxed.
Yeah,
So it's all
exactly.
about time management. So I would say that, like, bug bounty, do it not expecting to make money. If you do make money, great. And I know some people who've got into bug bounty and have made money, and then they've transitioned into web app pen testing. So but don't go into it expecting to make a lot of money. You probably won't.
And yeah, and to feed on that, like I did two. I never, I did two with a friend, and it was there was no bounty with it because it was such a low hanging fruit, and it's like, okay, like if so, you're probably gonna get 3 cents for it, so Yeah, and I remember actually like seeing it. It was an API key, getting an API key. I'm like, holy shit! Like what I learned from API Sec University, or stuff I'm doing on the side. It's like, fuck, dude, like this is real. Like, and then I was able to like take this API key, authenticate to something, and I'm like, holy shit! Like versus like doing like a CTF, and that transition to like I guess like the certifications. So to feed on that, that's the good training. That's all that stuff. Like, so do you feel as though like we should get certified if you're someone new, even if it's pen testing or web app? Like, what are your take on certifications? Because I know like NumSec, or I know like other folks like O'Day, Ryan, he's pretty much like a neighbor. He's like, like he has a few, but he's like, I don't care if anyone has certifications, experience is, better. But like, what is your take for certs and all that?
Yeah, I think sometimes they're a necessary evil. If you don't have the work experience, then the certs are pretty much there just to show a potential employer that you at least have the knowledge to gain the cert,
Mm-hmm.
which can alleviate concerns if you don't have the experience. Like, I honestly don't take many certs, if
Yep.
any, these days, but I don't need to, because when I have 10 plus years experience on my resume, like, if the question is ever asked, like, why don't you have any certs in an interview? I mean, it's not asked, but if it
Yeah.
was, I'd be very confused. I'd be like, why? Like, why do you need me to have certs? Haven't you seen I've been working as a pen tester for 10 years? Like, isn't that really certifying that I've, know how to do this job? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, that's the thing. Like, the more work experience you have, the less important certs are. And I
Yeah.
think that's important to remember.
Yeah. And it's funny because I just made a note of that. Like, so because I've heard from folks, and I don't do certs to get more money. I don't, like, me personally, I do them if it's to, you know, do it just to, help the organization, like PMPT and PJP. Like, did I need those certs? Absolutely not. Right. Like, it's like, I'm not doing it because I want more money. It was like, I was doing it to get that experience and talk about the content and talk about the experience, right? Because we make videos. It's like, okay, like if you're looking to get into the field, this would be awesome. Because a pet peeve of mine is like talking about a certification and you should get this if you're new and you never took it yourself. That really stabs me in the heart, right?
Mm.
It's like, yeah, that really just bugs me. So it's like, okay, like I'd rather just get a certification, and it's like, okay, now I can actually vouch, and I understand that cert, and I know what it was the good and the bad and the ugly and the evil, right? So yeah, that was, and you answered my question. Like, so if someone's in the field for 5 to 10 years, and you're a pen tester, like you said, like an OSCP, and it's like, oh, you don't have your OSEP, or you don't have your OSWE times 3, or whatever the hell else the offsec offers. And yeah, I always just wondered that, like, because I used to get that question because I came from like more of the network system engineering background before I transitioned to cyber.
Mhm.
And my thought process was, if I'm going to learn a technology, I'm going to get certified in it, right? That was always my thing. It's like, I'm doing routing switching, I'm doing ASA firewalls or FTDs. I want to go get my CCNP security. I want to go get CCIE. I want to go get all these other certifications that I was studying for, and I went for CCDP and Cisco certified design professional and CCNPs and whatever other certifications I ended up getting, is because I felt like that reinforced what I'm learning. It's like going, for your undergrad degree and just saying, oh, I'm just going to go from, my degree and never actually graduate. So it's like I'm learning
Right.
all this stuff, but without actually getting the reinforcement, accomplishment for that. I don't know. That's just the way I always thought. Not so much in the cyber world, but more like when I was a network engineer. And yeah, that was always my take, because I used to get that question a lot. Like, why have you taken so many exams, or why do you have, like, I don't do it for you. I'm doing it for me. You know what I mean? Mind your fucking
Mhm.
business, But yeah, so that's that. So I wanted to ask about like CTFs
Mhm.
versus real world pen testing. You made a valid point, when you were talking about like doing a CTF or doing like one of these labs, because it's like your objective is to capture a flag, but a real engagement, it's time, right? You have time constraints. So what is your take, CTF versus real world pen testing?
Yeah, so I feel like CTFs are good because they usually expose a technology that is either new or that's being used in a kind of weird way. I would say, obviously, they're not hardly any certs are quote unquote realistic,
Mm-hmm.
but certs don't. Sorry, CTFs. Sorry, but CTFs don't necessarily have to be realistic.
Exactly.
They're a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about this before we went live, but like
Mm-hmm.
I don't do CTFs alone. I do them as part of a team. So
Yep.
I have a big team. They're amusingly called Only Feet, but don't ask. They're a great team though. So we actually we're like nationally ranked. Like I think we got to like 13th in the US a couple of years ago
Sick.
on CTF time, which is tracks like most of the teams anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we have such a great group of talent, and we basically that's the thing. If you can get a bunch of people and like have a pool of really talented people who can just get in like a voice chat and
Mm-hmm.
just discuss a puzzle like a CTF challenge for
Mm-hmm.
hours, and you're all friends and you really enjoy doing it, then you can learn so much from other people because because you're working together as kind of like a hive mind. Like
Yep.
one of you will see something which will lead somebody else to be like, oh yeah, and that means this, or someone else say, oh, I've actually seen something related to that like 2 years ago. And it's great when that happens because everyone kind of learns.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really recommend doing CTFs as part of a team, especially if you can get like a bunch of people with different talents. Um, because yeah, a lot of these CTFs have like web app challenges, but they'll also have like reversing challenges, right?
Yep.
And they'll have just regular like crypto stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have if you have talent, like nobody's just going to do the crypto, but there might
Exactly.
be like somebody who mainly does crypto and also can help out with like web stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll have that variety. But the key point is don't ever think that CTFs are real or realistic. They're generally not. Having said that, they can definitely teach some stuff about a technology that you may be able to apply to real world stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If you ever see that technology being used, you might remember, oh, that CTF used it in a weird way. I wonder if I can somehow, manipulate it in like a similar way. So they definitely have that going for them.
Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%. And the one thing that I want to like, sprinkle on top is like when you're doing a CTF, you don't really do any real OSINT. You don't really do like external. Yeah, I guess like with like some of the pro labs, you have like an IP address and you have to use shuffle or proxy change to get in and do your thing. But it's mostly like, you know, you download a VPN client, you connect to it, and you go to town. and
Mhm.
and I really like that you said the team thing, because some people that I've talked to, like even when I would, asking for the APT labs, right? I think we talked about that from the pro labs. There was, I think flag, I don't know, 13 or 12, whatever flag. I was stuck. I was like in a wall, and I asked for help. I reached out to
Mhm.
people and say, hey, like you're good at this shit. Like you know how to do invading this stuff, blah blah blah. Can you help me out? And I always felt like if you're asking, I don't want to say asking for help, but it's like asking to work in a team, people look at it like, oh, this dude is cheating.
Mm.
And that's where I was like, oh, so the fact that you said, oh, like, no, I have a whole team. And then if we're going to go on a CTF, we just go as a team because everyone has their different skill sets. And I like to hear that because it reassures me of like, okay, like if me and five people or 10 or 100 people are getting in and shooting the shit and going to town on a box. So you don't
Yeah.
say that's like cheating.
No, I don't think so. Like it's the
Yeah.
same thing with like people who say like if you look up a walkthrough for a hack the box machine, it's cheating. Like no, I don't feel that. Like
Hmm.
if you need a walkthrough, then it's fine because at least you're learning when you're reading the walkthrough. Like
Yeah.
ultimately, this is all about learning, right?
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So I don't see it as cheating. If you're doing it for like if there's like a cert at the end that required you to like if you're breaking like the rules in some way, then obviously try and avoid you know doing it the entire thing as a team. But like asking for help, I don't think is ever should be seen as cheating. Like
Yeah.
unless you're like in an exam setting, for example. But
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. It's like if you're in the OSCP and like, hey man, I need help
Right.
with
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That
Yeah.
that's where you draw the
You draw
line.
the
But yeah,
line. Yeah.
if it's just a regular like HackTheBox machine or something, and you're stuck, or a
Yeah.
regular CTF where you're even allowed teams, right? That's like kind of the whole point. Then yeah,
Exactly.
like absolutely.
Yeah, no, I like to hear that, and no, I've been because obviously for some of the I don't think any of them because I actually looked because I was stuck on I think offshore or one of the other pro labs, and I was like, all right, let me just look up a walkthrough, and there was no walkthrough on any of the pro labs, and it was funny because I didn't even ask Hack the Box, but like I didn't see any walkthroughs on any of them. So I'm like, oh, I
Mhm.
guess we're not allowed because I'm not gonna even ask because I don't see one out there. So it's like I'm not gonna go like, oh, this is how you solve Dante or offshore or Rasta Labs. Oh, let's do it together today, guys. And I'm giving all the flags away, and I'm like, oh shit, this is no bueno. But so that's all right. So I guess what do we have? 21 minutes. I know I want to be kind of your. We have some, questions in the chat. We can definitely
Mhm.
start answering. And then web app, huh? So cardio burp preference. That's on you.
Yeah, I feel like everyone knows the answer to this one, but yeah, I'm a burp guy. I'm not like necessarily against Kaido. I just don't think it's ready yet. I get why they've released. You know, I just and it also seems to be way more aimed at like bug bounty hunting. I don't know any pen testing company that would use Kaido like 100% on their team. Like Burp's been around for 20 plus years now. Um, it's integrated. It's got a big company behind it. Paulswigger are huge. They just actually got like $100 million investment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they like the team behind Burp is quite large, like developing it. It also has a bunch of extensions, which I don't think Kaido supports like any non-visual extensions. Correct me if I'm wrong about that in chat, but like but that's not to say that they should at this point, right? Kaido is really only 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure Kaido is going to go places. I just don't think it's ready right now. I've used it. I'm not a big fan of it personally, but competition is good ultimately. Like we had basically Burp and Zap for years. Zap being a 100% free project where it was completely open source, and now we have Kaido, which is a paid product. It's cheaper. I think it only has like 3 or 4 devs. So at least they're going to give Burp a little bit of a run for their money, I think. So ultimately, in the long run, I think it's good. But yeah, Burp will always probably be used by me just because I like it so much.
Yeah, burp is pretty. I've been tinkering with it a lot more lately, just because I went through the bug bounty thing on Hack the
Mm.
Box and I think I might even stop being a cheapskate and pay the $500 for the year to get pro. But
Pro is so much better, but yeah.
yeah, so I guess we can ask that now. Like, why would someone go to pro versus just a community edition?
So really, the main advantages of the pro version, if you're doing regular web app pen testing, you get the scanning abilities, right? Which are it's so the scanner basically has a bunch of predefined payloads already.
Hmm.
The idea being it understands the context of all the payloads, so it will know if it's using a time based payload to check how long the response took, right? So
Hmm.
it's context based. So it's basically it's no different to scanning with like nuclei, I guess.
Okay.
If you've used nuclei before, but it's
Hmm.
all context based. It understands it. It also has access to the collaborator, which I don't believe the free version has. So
No, I don't
you
think
can
so.
do basically out of band testing. So if you have you can use payloads which very specifically say, hey, like they're like a host name,
Hmm.
and if the server that you're sending them to ever pings that host name or fetches that host name in any way, the collaborator server realizes and it can trace it right back to the payload that caused that. So that's
Gotcha.
really useful. But honestly, the biggest thing is just the intruder. So intruder in Community Edition is extremely slow. It's
Yeah.
purposefully made slow. But the intruder is a massively powerful fuzzing tool. It's honestly underused by a lot of web app pen testers. I use it an insanely large amount of time, but the intruder in Pro is completely unlimited in
That
terms of how many payloads you can send.
yeah,
So
versus getting that throttle.
right. So
Yeah.
those are the three reasons. Also, the fact you can save stuff. Obviously, if
Yeah.
you're doing a pen test, you kind of want to save your projects. So that's really good. But the scanner is really nice, and the fact that you can have extensions, which also in Pro, because you have access to the scanner, you can have extensions which integrate into the scanner itself, adding more scan checks.
Mm.
So that's even better, to be honest. But there's a ton of reasons why, if you're a professional pen tester, you probably
Yeah.
want it. Those like the top, I don't know, 3, 4, 5. I can't remember how many I mentioned, but yeah,
Yeah.
that,
No,
that's
for
my, that's
five.
my sales that's my sales pitch, and I'll just say they don't pay me, but yeah.
And that's not bad for $500. If you think about it, if you're a web app tester, even if you're a contractor, you're gonna make that
Yeah,
and more on one test. So it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's definitely worth the $500, and it's per year, right? Is it like per
Yeah, it's,
year?
it's per year, and you can install it if it's a single user license, so you can install it on multiple devices. Like if you have a Windows PC that you do most of your testing for, but maybe you use a Linux VM for
Yep,
occasional testing, you can
that's what I
install it
exactly.
and license it twice, and it it,
Okay,
it will cost you one license. Yeah, it's per user, which is really
gotcha.
good.
That's pretty good. All right. What any other cool?
Who's the new offset? I I don't know. I mean, I guess TCM is probably getting there.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I that's the thing. Like offset still have so much of a hold just because they
yeah,
have the OSP, and it's kind of the, I don't know. It's kind of just the brand for, if you think of a pen testing, so OSCP is almost the go-to one.
yeah,
I don't know how long they're going to have that for. But yeah, I think probably TCM will eventually give them a run for their money.
yep.
Um, that's the only one I can think of right now. Like you have
And,
eLearn, but eLearn were bought by INE, and they're kind of not that good now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then you have
So
HackTheBox like the CPTS, CBBH.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, I want to be doing my CPTS really shortly. Here shortly, and I definitely will make a video on it and give you my feedback. But I think from even when Heath put his senior pen tester position out there, I saw like obviously PMPT and CPTS. When I saw that on there, I was like, all right, so they respect that cert.
Mm,
So that was pretty
yeah.
cool. And I think, yeah, TCM is giving Offsec the run for their money, especially how they're getting more into now. They just dropped that blue team stuff and they're going to be doing a blue team cert. So it's like now they can support not only the offensive folks, now they can, get into, and a lot of companies are, getting that SOC and IR and all that stuff because, you know, in my opinion, there's probably more blue team jobs than red team or than offensive security jobs, in my opinion. Uh,
Yeah.
what is your take? Do you think so? I think there's more like security engineers, IRs.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah. All right. What's the next question here? Let's see. How can I learn web app testing? Like struggling working on the easy TTF meaning and fine with. Yeah, I'm with you,
Yeah,
Calvin. So I'll let T answer that. Go
it's
for it.
it's a tough one. I honestly, whenever people ask like how do you get into it, I would start with the fundamentals. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you could grasp the fundamentals, I feel like it's gonna make your life easier down the line. So, and by fundamentals, I literally mean like, so learning about the actual technology. You don't have to be an absolute expert in like HTTP, all right? But learn about the basics of HTTP. Learn about the basics of JavaScript, right? How browsers work. learn how like databases work on the back end. And again, it doesn't have to be like, oh, you need to learn how MySQL works, how Postgres works, how MS SQL, right? You don't have to learn that amazingly well, but learn the basics of SQL, learn the basics of that kind of stuff. And you can even do that. It really depends on how you like learning. If you learn by like reading or watching videos, then there's tons of resources. Personally, I like learning by doing, which is kind of like it was a weird like foreign concept to me when I first heard of it, but it kind of makes sense. Like the idea is like, okay, so I want to learn how web apps work. I should go build a web app. All right. And you kind of just start off knowing nothing, and then you start Googling and figuring out, oh, well, I need this, I need to set up a server. So, the first thing you do is you go and learn how to set up Apache or Nginx. And then you're like, oh, well, now I need a web language to run on the server. Well, the easiest one is probably PHP. It still is.
Yeah.
So, then you have to learn how to set up PHP, and then you can start writing just random PHP code and build stuff with HTML. And so I think that's probably the way to go, because if you can learn how to do that and how that all fits together, then suddenly you can start visualizing exploits and vulnerabilities at all different levels. So you can see, okay, well, how does an SQL injection really work? And you can sort of visualize the SQL injection going from the browser, like a form, for example, or the URL to the server passing it into the PHP code, the PHP code putting it into like a query, and that query getting executed in the database. And that I feel like is a much easier way of getting your head around something that than any kind of just reading or looking at a video can. I feel like that realistically is probably the best way to go. So that's where I would start, and then obviously then like the world's the limit. Really, the sky's the limit. There you can go into anything, any kind of vulnerabilities, and just keep learning. But start with the basic stuff, the fundamentals, and then just pick one vulnerability to learn about, like XSS, SQL injection, and see what happens.
No, I completely agree with that, because it's just sort of like the same thing in my world, right? Let's say, Active Directory or something like that. It's like, if you don't understand what LDAP is when it's querying, into your AD, if you never set up AD, how are you going to really understand what is, certain things that reside on your domain controller, or what is a FSMO role, or what a GC, a global catalog, like all these little things, and understanding when to, set up your server, you install ADDS and you install whatever certificate services, and you understand LDAP-S and LDAP. Now it's like, okay, now when I'm querying, 389 or whatever, 636 or whatever, if it's LDAP-S or LDAP, now I understand what it's actually doing when it's authenticating. And now when you're looking at, like, for example, some kind of a passback attack or whatever kind of, attack that we're doing against AD or abusing misconfigurations. Now, like, okay, what is an attribute? If you never really went into your attribute editor, which, I don't recommend, if you don't know what AD, don't fuck with that. But you won't have an AD server. So if you're a sysadmin, don't do that, please. But yeah, like actually building something and really understanding it before you attack it. I think that's that it connects the dots versus like doing that CTF or doing those things. It's like, okay, I'm running like Zap or Burp, and I'm like hitting this and I'm clicking a button. It's like, what is it actually doing when it gives me status code 200? What is it for whatever the hell the thing is, like when it's actually going through that post and get requests. But if you don't understand how it's actually traversing that data and how that data is moving, it's going to be a long journey for you. And that's always my recommendation as well. So totally. All right. Next one. Recommend for pen testing with good labs.
There's tons.
Yeah.
HackTheBox, try hack me. I mean, pen test the labs, literally in the name. Yeah, and like Portsmouth Web Academy. I don't know. I feel like there's so many out there now, and they're all pretty good. So yeah.
So we can talk about all those, but just like we were just saying just a second ago, I think the best lab you can do is whatever technology, whatever area you want to learn about, set that technology up and then build it, right? If we're talking about web apps, like how Tib said, like, okay, like let's go ahead and build LAMP. Let's go ahead and build XYZ or whatever the case may be. And now, it may not work the first time. Cause I remember I built my first LAMP server when I went to, start Apache 2. And it's like, fuck, it kept on giving me errors and I didn't know what I was doing. But then I had to fumble through it. And just because I needed to learn this because, I was running some kind of server and whatever I was doing. So if you're trying to learn pen testing on, Wi-Fi, set up a, rinky-dink router and go buy a $10, Wi-Fi card that, supports promiscuous mode, and just like start running attacks and start learning about the different technologies and all that. That's always my thing before going out to any site to learn labs, because the sites that you learn labs, you connect to a VPN client, but you don't really understand the technology that you're attacking, especially if you're a noob. That's always my recommendation. I don't know. What is your take?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. So obviously, yeah, setting up your own labs is always good. I will say that sometimes setting up a lab for a specific technology may, especially if you're trying to exploit something, like a specific vulnerability, is going to be harder. Like for example, the was it the? Someone tipped my tongue now. That Java vulnerability from a couple of years ago. The log4j, that was it.
Log4j, yeah.
Like setting up a log4j like exploit scenario is actually kind of tricky if you don't know what you're doing with Java, especially. So like that's where I would like say, okay, well, it's probably just worth spinning up one of the many log4j exploit boxes that you'll find on like Try Hack Me or HackTheBox.
Exactly.
But yeah, if you want to learn the fundamental stuff, then absolutely you can do that. And if you're just making a very simple, injection vulnerability for SQL injection, then you can do that yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Fair enough. Fair point. All right. Next one. All right. Yeah. Do the HackTheBox certs hold any weight in getting a job? I never took any HackTheBox certifications as of yet. I don't know if I'll do the SOC one, just because I have all the training. I am going through it just to see how it is. But in my opinion, HackTheBox is getting more recognized. But if you're trying to become a SOC analyst, I would probably go for Security Plus, CYSA Plus, maybe Blue Team Level 1. I think those are a little more recognized for like a SOC position, and those managers may not know too much about HackTheBox because HackTheBox is more on the offensive pen testing stuff that where it came up on. They may not even know that HackTheBox offers any SOC stuff. So that would be my recommendation. What about you?
I really don't know much about the Blue Team side of things, so like I defer to other people on that kind of thing. So yeah, I would say HackTheBox again, is probably more known with the Red Team side. But even their certs aren't that well known in the industry. I think they're going to get there, but
no, I think so too. All right, let's see. Next one. Any good books to read for Red Team? I really like. You can go ahead and answer it, and I'll get this book.
I don't really have any. I would question what they mean by Red Team. Do they mean an actual Red Team or like just red teaming in because that's the thing. Like, there's the whole Red Team and Blue Team. Thing. Technically, I'm Red Team, but I'm not on a Red Team.
Yeah,
so
fair
I think
enough.
That's the question that needs to be like answered. Do you mean actual red teaming or just being like Red Team side of things?
Yeah, and that's a very, very fair question because, if you're doing red teaming, it's so different than like offensive security and pen testing, right? But if you want to learn some obviously red team stuff, there's CRTO and stuff like that. If you want to, but these are some cool books, and I learned quite a few. There's Red Team Field Manual. This one, this is V2, and then this is the V1. So, and they're just a couple bucks on Amazon, just a few dollars, like a couple bucks, and it's pretty useful. Like when I'm, I don't sit here in my office and read, but if I'm going like on a trip, I'll take some of these books and I'll just shoot the shit on a plane ride or if I'm taking a road trip and I'm the one that's not driving in the back seat, I'll like pop that open, read it, and learn different techniques and stuff like that. Because these books, like, I think, like, when you're in this field, you have your arsenal of tools and you stay in that little lane. Hardly ever that you're going to start like gravitating or navigating outside of your lane and trying like, oh, let's explore this. No, we know my shit works, so I'm going to stick with this. And so, like, obviously, when you see these books, it's like, okay, this looks intriguing. I may not do it on my engagement or whatever at work, but at least I'll be able to get that exposure. Do you find yourself doing that too? Like, just like staying in your own lane with your tools, or do you like going out and downloading shit from GitHub and just start tinkering around using tools that do you do that?
I generally, yeah, try and use a bunch of tools. Just because, and especially do it if I find something interesting that looks like, if I find like a Reddit post where people are talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll try this out. And sometimes they work out. Like there's that new SQL map tool that begins with G. That honestly, I don't. It's not as good as SQL map in my opinion, but I've tried it. So yeah, back to books. I think Georgia Weidman's book. I forget what it's called. But it's like
it's just it's a blue one.
Yeah, it's like It's just penetration testing guide or something.
Yeah,
that's definitely worth reading for sure.
Yeah, I had that book and I actually gave it away. I gave it away because a friend of mine was like, "Oh, I want to read it." I didn't give it. I loaned it, but I never got it back.
Gotcha.
So I gave it away. So let's see. Like, I know. I know. Paul got a question. So, what are your thoughts on Web3, and how soon would you apply for your skills? I have no idea what Web3 is, so that's all you, boo boo.
Yeah, this is the thing. Like, so Web3 is technically the web interface for like Ethereum. And I honestly, it's a pet peeve of mine that they've kind of stolen, because Web 2 was basically Ajax, right? Web 2 was basically submitting requests without the page reloading and, more interactivity. So I'm kind of annoyed that the cryptocurrency people just stole Web3. Like Web3 is not the next iteration of the web. Like that, let's get that. It's a kind of separate thing. You need an entirely separate browser for it. Basically, it's kind of just weird. The web app side of Web3 stuff is no different to regular web pen testing. The cryptocurrency side of it is really the thing that actually needs separate testing. I've never, full disclosure, I've never actually been asked to do a Web3 assessment. I probably would refuse to do one anyway, just because I don't really know. You basically have to learn about smart contracts and how to hack smart contracts, which, like, again, is just something that doesn't interest me, like, personally. The website of things is fine. I could probably do the website of testing, but like the actual finding usually logical bugs in smart contracts is just not what I want to do. So honestly, you can become a web tester and never see Web3 stuff, because it is a completely separate kind of discipline. In terms of the actual thing they want tested is the smart contract to make sure they're not losing money via some weird logic bug. But yeah, that's where I would go with that.
Cool. Yeah, I have no idea. I think there was one smart contract on like one of the Advert of Cyber days, and I was like, I'm definitely waiting for the walkthrough for this shit because I don't know anything about that. There was some days. I think it wasn't last year. I think it was the year before in 2022. But all right, Kali, Parrot, or build your own OS for pen. I just use Kali. Parrot. I use Parrot more for Wi-Fi pen testing. Wi-Fi, I really Parrot, like all my alpha drivers always worked. Like, I guess Kali stepped up their game with their driver repository, but I remember trying to get like my alpha card installed in Kali. It was like a fucking nightmare. It was like it would never work, and it was like, I don't know, but Parrot always was like plug and play. Just plug it in, do an IW config, boom, it was right there. I'm like, I didn't have to do anything with it. Thank you. But what about for you?
I personally use Kali, but like for web app testing, honestly, I just use my Mac. Like
Gotcha.
that's the thing. When you're a web app tester, the most stuff you do is Burp Suite.
Yeah.
And I have a Mac, just a work Mac,
Mm-hmm.
and Burp runs really nicely on Mac, so I just use that. I do have a Kali instance in the cloud, which I can use if I ever need like to run SQL map or like Ferox Buster or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. So that's where I go with that. But native is always better generally, so I always use native stuff.
Gotcha. Fair point. All right, is that all, folks? If there's any other question, let me look. I don't think that's it. Yeah. All right. So obviously, I want to thank you. I want to go ahead and share. If you guys want to check out, he has some awesome videos. I learned I learned a lot of stuff from you, and
I
now you
appreciate it.
know. And I want to copy this and shoot this in the chat. Oh, faster than me. So go ahead and just obviously follow him. He has a Twitter page. He's always up in the hills with all the latest and greatest stuff. So I'm glad to be a follower, and I think I've been following you for a minute. And yeah, I just want to say obviously thank you so much. And any last words for everyone, that's out there? Any last advice that you would give them for web testing or just for life in general, and then we'll wrap it up.
Oh, I don't know. Now I'm on the spot. Probably not. But I do planning on gonna do a stream tomorrow, and we're gonna mess around with the DEF CON badges on stream.
Oh,
So I have an
sick.
overhead camera. We're gonna flash the firmware and just mess around. I have 3 badges from various reasons, but so if we brick one of them, it's fine. Like we can go nuts on these things.
That's
But yeah,
that's sick.
So
Yeah. So what time is it at?
it'll probably be around like 5 p.m. Eastern. It might be
Okay.
slightly later, but yeah, it'll be an evening stream.
Awesome.
So
So
yeah.
do you just stream on Twitch or do you stream on YouTube as well?
I actually stream to Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn like simultaneously. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Same here. Okay. But no one ever shows up on Twitch because I don't even know how to use it, to be honest. There's one person that's probably Devin that's just watching to see.
I love Twitch for streaming. Like that's my main platform. But yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah, maybe I have to pick your brain for some tricks and tips. But thanks so much, Tibbs. I really appreciate it, dude. Much love. Hopefully, we get to link up again and hang out more. And yeah,
Absolutely.
keep fucking killing it.